Today's episode of Better Thinking is with Gregg Chapman, psychologist. We talk about the Gottman Method, which is a relationship counselling modality or approach. He's got a wealth of experience and you're going to really enjoy this one.
Okay, life can be crazy. You're feeling like you're sinking, just trying to find a meaning. It's time for better thinking, yeah, better thinking. Time to tune in. Let's go.
So I'd like to welcome Gregg Chapman to podcast Better Thinking. Gregg's going to be talking to us about relationships, some of the pitfalls, and a little bit about how we might go out and work with some of those challenges and areas to kind of explore. So welcome, Gregg.
Oh, than's, Nesh. Yeah.
Appreciate you coming. Maybe we could just start with a little bit about what do you usually see in your clinical practice with regards to clients coming in? What are some of the challenges? I mean, obviously, a lot of our listeners out there would be, like all human beings, having some, tripping moments, some challenges and the like. Some more significant than others. Maybe you could talk a little bit about your practice and kind of frame. So, what are some of the challenges that you would commonly see?
Certainly. I'm glad to hear you using the word challenges, Nesh. People often think in terms of the word problems or difficulties. I find the word challenges much more acceptable in that it evokes some sort of energy towards a goal, whereas problem tends to be, gee, we're in a hole and this is going down and there's negative thinking. What I would do when I'm talking to couples is I use the method devised by John and Julie Gottman, two professors in the United States. Actually, John's a retired professor. We call them emeritus professors, those who aren't familiar with that term. And Julie's an associate professor, husband and wife team. Got together quite some time back, and over 40 years they've done research on interactions in couples, developed a theory and a therapy to follow on to address the difficulties and to develop the best relationships that people can have. The sort of issues that people will come in with will be across the spectrum that most of us will be familiar with. Has there ever been a relationship in the history of the world where there haven't been difficulties and challenges? No. Between nations, between states, between groups and tribes, and in couples. So everybody has challenges and difficulties. The sort of things that are more common in the relationships we see would be disagreements about the children, how to raise them, where they're going to school, smaller things like that. Or sometimes when I say smaller things, that might be a big issue. Also, frequency and quality of their intimacy, their sex life. Sometimes there'll be differences of opinion about philosophical or religious or political differences. There'll be differences in terms of how one partner wants the other partner to speak to them or give them time. A whole range of the raft of things that anybody could imagine that they have problems in their relationship. These seem to be pretty universal sorts of things. There's only a couple of categories. Sounds very simplistic, but it's fairly true. There's only a handful of things that cause these difficulties, but they're the nature of human relationships. We're not bulls or tigers or something, so we react as human beings. So there's commonalities there.
Mm-hmm. I definitely want to drill into that a little bit more and find out about the Gottman approach. But just touching back and John and Julie's work, is it true, and I hope I've got this right, and maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong here, is it true that John came up with this, I suppose his thesis came from, he was a mathematician firstly, and part of sort of coming up to this interest of relationships, my understanding was he was sitting down with a colleague of his. They were talking about, challenges that they were having in relationships, and they said, why don't we go out and do our PhDs, our mathematics PhDs on, what constitutes, good relationship and, what are the factors that go out and cause challenges, difficulties, and the like? Is that true? Or
Correct.
It is.
It's true. Yeah. John's delightful, and he's, as you said, a mathematician. He's a classical professor type. He's very precise and very thorough, and had a lot of questions about how relationships work and why they don't work. And being the mathematician, the scientific thinker that he is, he put this into a experiment. And the media called it the Love Lab. He set up basically a small motel unit where the cameras came on at 9 a.m. in the morning, went off at 9 p.m. at night, and they filmed and then analysed every interaction the 3,000 couples they put through this experiment had with each other. And as a result of that, they did a statistical analysis called a cluster analysis, which basically divides the subjects in an experiment into different clusters or groups, if you like. And they came up with two groups, which they called, which is rather like rhyming or jingoistic. I often chuckle when I hear it. It's the masters of relationship. Reminds me of the masters of the universe on TV. And the disasters of relationship. And, people are keen to hear when they've done the Gottman relationship check-up questionnaire whether we were masters or disasters. And we'll often have a little bit of a joke about that without any negative connotations. But there were some significant differences John and Julie found between these two groups. One of which was that they would characteristically, in conflict, in argument, in debate, heated debate, the masters would come up, even though in conflict, with a ratio of 5-to-1 positive to negative comments. So they might say, look, that really me off. However, I'm taking your point, and I see what you mean and why it would have upset you too. So they're making that positive concession and recognising the partner and respecting the partner. Whereas the plural disasters had a ratio of 0.8-to-1, which is pretty much fewer positive comments by about 20% than the masters would have made. So this made a big difference.
So the 5-to-1 meaning 5-to-1 sort of negative connotations to positive. Is that for the disasters, or are we talking about the masters being 5-to-1? Sort of positives to how does that ratio?
Correct, yeah. When we talk about a ratio, we talk about the equivalence or the non-equivalence of two categories. So we've got here positive comments and negative comments. Mm-hmm. Now the masters would have made 5 positive comments as opposed to every single negative comment they made. That's what we mean by the 5-to-1 ratio.
Yes, okay, that makes sense.
And the disasters were pretty much they're slightly less in terms of making positive comments than even making one. They made a negative one less often. More often. Yeah.
I imagine for the disasters in not having as many positive things to say, resentment could potentially start to build.
You bring up an interesting term there, Nesh, in terms of resentment. I'm translating that to be equivalent to contempt, which is one of the 4 characteristics that John identified in his disaster group. He could, with a 96% reliability rate, predict over a 5-year span if these 4 factors occurred and they weren't addressed in therapy, then this couple would divorce. And in follow-up studies, longitudinal studies, we call those, taking place over a period of time. Over the 5 years, he came back to those couples that he'd analysed and found that they had in actual fact divorced in 96 out of 100 cases, which is quite stunning.
That's incredible.
It is. And the 4 factors he called, which I think is quite memorable and quite raises an interesting metaphor, the 4 horsemen. The 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, the end of the world. I always chuckle when I think or even say of that. In fact, I often tell my clients I had them visit my relationship one night. Do you mind if I tell you about that?
Of course, I want to hear.
I had a very nice meal prepared by my gorgeous wife, and she prepared a quiche for us, and she put it in the microwave on the little aluminium tray the quiche comes in, but neglected to put in another plate underneath that, you see, and the quiche spilled over onto the microwave tray. So we had tea, very nice, and I'm taking my plate like a nice, good person back out to the dishwasher, and I looked in the microwave and thought, it's flown over. I'll wash it and clean it up for her. So I took it out, and it took quite a job to clean it up. It was hard to get off. And I did this, and I scrubbed it up and put it all back in. I thought, that'll save her the job. Then I went to the study, and I'm on the computer, and then out of my peripheral vision, I saw a little figure emerge, hands on hips. And hands on hips doesn't mean I'm coming to give you a hug. So I thought, my name was spat out. Great. Oops, yeah, she's not going to give me a hug right enough. So How many times have I told you? You see, that's a harsh startup. John Gottman's identified that, those sorts of things. How many times have I told you? Why don't you? Have you or have you not? Why don't you? These challenges that negate the message because the emotion gets too stirred up. So anyway, how many times have I told you not to leave the sponge in the sink? No. I thought, wait a minute, wait. I'm becoming a little bit defensive, you see. The second horseman here, becoming defensive, disowning responsibility perhaps. Although I think I wasn't probably disowning responsibility too much. And I said, look, I'm terribly sorry. I know that upsets you. I just sort of forgot, I'm a bloke and, I'll do that and try and, make sure I do that in future. Not good enough. Oh, I'm in real trouble here. She's just not going to back off on this. So this went on once or twice. And then I thought, look, blow this, I'm busy here. So I actually said something to that effect, go away, look, I'm sorry, I've said I'm sorry. How many times do I have to say I'm sorry? So she storms off. I turn around. Then I thought, wait a minute. I'm doing the Gottman work, relationship counselling. The four horsemen are just stampeded across my relationship here. So I laugh at that and often share that with clients because it shows how even someone who likes to consider himself in the master side of things, although my dear wife would say, no, you're not, it can happen. These things happen to all of us. And I like to put that out to my clients because it underscores the point that every relationship is going to have problems, even informed relationships, even deeply loving relationships. I mean, my wife and I are just absolutely totally still, I think, in a stage of, early romance. People say it wears off. I don't know about that. I sit down and think, no, it hasn't worn off yet. Something's wrong with me. I'm still very much in love with her. So four horsemen went straight through the relationship. The interesting thing was too afterwards, because my wife is of Portuguese descent. Well, he's Portuguese, full stop. The notion of the stonewalling, she stormed off. I sort of turned around, a bit annoyed. I thought, I better go fix this up. So I thought, knowing that you've got to wait for about 20 minutes for the cortisol and the adrenaline to leach out of the system, I waited that period of time, went to the lounge room, made a gesture, how's the TV show going? He said, whoop, turned away. I thought, not yet. So I came back another 10 minutes. And by that time she'd calmed down, a cup of tea, we're all good. So we did the physiological self-soothing thing. She was watching a TV show, not dwelling on it, which is physiological soothing. And I was getting on with some other stuff and thinking I'll come back in 10 minutes with a cup of tea. So there you go. All relationships have their difficulties and challenges.
Well, I think you were explaining exactly what happens in my world as well, except
I think it happens in everybody's.
I think I probably do more, a fair bit of criticising myself, and we tend to spar with criticism, defensiveness, and the other two that you mentioned. So we've got criticism, we've got defensiveness, contempt, and stonewalling.
Yeah.
Maybe you could talk a little bit about each of those in a bit more detail, and I suppose what are some of the remedies, or I think Gottman talks about it as antidotes. What can we do to try and get away from the horsemen, and get back on track.
With criticism, we'll take them one by one, obviously. This is essentially defined as you're making a verbal attack on your partner's character or personality as a preface to then making the complaint about the content of the issue. John Gottman and Julie Gottman have looked at that and said this usually begins with, how many times have I told you? Or have I or have I not told you? I could rely on you to do whatever it is. I could rely on you not to, da-da-da. So it's a critical attack. You're angry and you're trying to put the person down to some extent. That's a harsh startup. Now, the remedy for the criticism, the harsh startup, is the gentle startup. Gentle startup is often put forward in a formulaic sense, which is important. People can try and practice this, then maybe personalise it their own individual circumstances. The 3-stage formula is recommended as an antidote to this, and that goes a little like this. I feel. Now, for some people, that's going to be difficult because they can't really identify and state what they're feeling. So with my clients, I say, it's okay to say, I feel, darling, I was going to say, I feel something, I don't know what it is, I'm not real sure, I just feel pretty yucky, or I feel a bit confused here. It's okay to do that. Some people have difficulty saying, well, I'm feeling distressed, I'm feeling envious here, and labelling the emotion accurately. But if they can, that helps. The second step of the formula is because. Now, we describe here the situation. We don't begin with the accusatory you. I feel upset because you never do da-da-da. That's a criticism. So I feel upset because, and I usually say to people, we try to put this into what the grammarians, the people who study grammar, would describe as a passive rather than an active voice. A passive voice would be exemplified by this situation. I drop a box or some container on the table, and I can say, the container was dropped on the table, or the container dropped on the table. There's no agency in there, there's no person involved. Or I can say, I dropped, or you dropped. Now, one of the things that's going to fire people up in conversations is, I feel upset because there's an accusatory you, there's a blame situation. We try very much to avoid that you in there. We try and make it a nice statement or a passive statement. I feel upset, Greg, because the sponge was left in the sink, and what I'd really like, darling, is for you to remember to put that away next time. And I would have gone, oh yeah, well, I'll do that, darling. It would have worked out differently to our 4 horsemen stampede.
Sure.
So I didn't follow my own advice, but hey, I'm a human being, and occasionally I stuff up like everybody, and I forgive myself, and I hope my darling wife forgives me. I think she's gotten over it by now. And I'm not leaving the sponge in the sink anymore, by the way. No.
But you is a big trigger word, I suppose.
The
it tends
accusatory
to kind of accuse. You did or you didn't do. Immediately kind of goes out and puts the other person on the back foot.
Yeah, for sure. Then defensiveness comes in.
Yes.
See?
Yes.
Now, defensiveness may not necessarily follow from.
That's the other horseman.
But another horseman, the second horse, we call the second horseman. So this defensiveness is not taking responsibility, they say. It's victimising yourself to ward off an attack. You know, oh, look, don't pick on me. Or look, it's not my responsibility. You want to put the sponge away, you put it away. You see? So I'm disavowing responsibility when there's a situation where I have a responsibility, and in that case, I did have a responsibility. I'd agreed to do it, and I forgot to do it. So there was perhaps a sort of a reason that I forgot, but yeah, I'm responsible for that forgetting. So the difference between a reason and an excuse. The excuse is, you have agency, you have control, you could do it differently. And a reason is, I'm late for work because I broke my leg on the way in. Well, not much you can do about that. Okay, you're forgiven. I'm late for work because I forgot to set my alarm. Well, a different situation. So this is the defensiveness thing. Now, accepting responsibility is the remedy for that. So, as I said, modelling on that illustration I was giving before about our interaction, I could have said, I'm very sorry, yes, I realise I did say I'd do that and I haven't done it. My bad. Please forgive me this time, and I'll resolve not to do it again. I'll make a special mental note of putting that away and doing what you'd like me to do so it doesn't get you upset. Because I don't want to upset you, because I love you.
That's super hard, isn't it? Because
it is. Yeah.
I have this huge tendency myself to become defensive.
It's a natural thing.
Yeah, and it might be that I'm running late from work, and my wife might kind of say, why are you running late? Which is a valid question. Yeah, I hear it as a criticism though, as though it's you shouldn't be running late. You're at fault for running late, and immediately I have this sort of tendency to kind of try and explain my way out. And what's interesting is that there are valid times, there are not so valid times. So there could be times where I say, genuinely, I had to kind of stay back. There was a client who was in crisis, needed to go out and make sure that they were, safe, etc., and so on, or wrap something up, quite well in the session. But there's also probably a lot of times where it's not really valid, but I'll provide an excuse. The taking responsibility is kind of hard because it says, yes, you're right, I'm at fault, rather than kind of saying, you're right, I said I would be home at 5:30 or at 5:45 or whenever that number might be, that time might be. It's my responsibility to say I'll be home at 6 and make it at 6. Or if I say it's going to be 5:30, make it at 5:30. And by kind of trying to bargain my way out, I imagine from her shoes, she's going to feel quite unheard or dismissed. That she can't get through what she's feeling and why that's so hurtful.
Yeah, and there'll be a reason that you'll be tackling that and addressing that and bringing it up. there might be something in her world that she's distressed about, and now we're late for the dinner engagement, or now I'm not able to walk the dog, or now I've got to bath the kids. You were going to do it earlier.
Yeah, she prepared a nice dinner. It's nice and hot and warm, and
it's cool down.
hubby's not home to enjoy it. Yet all these all this time has gone into trying to provide something really a nice gift.
Yeah.
So moving on to the other, what's we got? Stonewalling?
Yep. First we've got contempt. Stonewalling can occur at any point. It doesn't have to follow 1, 2, 3 stepwise. We can say sequential.
Sure.
So there's usually criticism and the defensiveness, and then contempt will develop if these two keep interacting over a period of time. There's criticism and contempt. Criticism and defensiveness. Criticism and defensiveness. Later, this is contempt. Now, contempt is looking at the situation where you think you begin to dislike the person, and we make the distinction between the person and the behaviour, but in this situation you're not. Like you're saying, you're an annoying person, or you're a bad person, or you're an envious person or something. So rather than, I'm not really happy with that behaviour, when we're talking to a young child, we won't say you're a bad boy or a bad girl. That's not best practice. The best thing to do is, look, I love you a lot, but this behaviour is really not okay. Now, you wouldn't talk necessarily the same way to a partner, because that might be doing the parent-child sort of interaction and actually implying that you're treating them in an inferior sense. But with contempt, the remedy there is to build up a culture of appreciation, and the notion in your own head, you're thinking of the positives the person does. And all the positive qualities and the little acts of service that they might do. And I would say the acts of service, which comes from the very popular, I don't know that it's empirically validated notion of the 5 languages of love, which a lot of people have heard of, where you have different ways of expressing and receiving love that are preferred, and their quality, spending quality time, or doing acts of service, little odd jobs, providing small gifts to the partner, and so on. So we perhaps need to look at that and with the partner. How do you like to receive affection? How do you like to be validated and made to feel special and important? Oh, well, that might be by, words of affirmation, being told I did a good job. It might be as simple as that. And someone, I'm really happy. You're telling me you noticed and you congratulated me and you thanked me. Gee, I feel good about that. I think one of the myths of relationship therapy, relationship counselling, is that communication is the problem. Communication is the problem. Certainly communication can be a problem, not denying that. But there are a whole raft of other factors that can come in to play. And what we're doing here is we're talking about, communication is a problem. You see how we deconstructed it into a number of factors that come up with less effective communication and the remedies that lead to more effective, happier communication. And you were saying a moment ago, I'll carry on if that's okay, with the stonewalling. Stonewalling is the go away, don't bother me. I tried to put the sponge away and I forgot. Now I'm going to go to my work. Go away. And my wife goes, well, no point talking to you. I'm just going to go watch TV because you're not listening to what I say and you don't think it's important that I want the sponge put away. That would be stonewalling. Stonewalling is like the Aussie expression, stonewalling is the American expression, putting up a brick wall. Yeah. So you either verbally say to the person, go away, don't annoy me, or get lost or something, or you physically remove yourself from the situation. The door slamming as you go out, perhaps go and get in the car, go down the coffee shop at the pub, go and see your mates or girlfriends or something, So.
Can it also be like switching off where someone goes out and zones out, or they won't speak, or like Absolutely. An eye rolling might be a little bit more nuanced?
Yeah, for sure.
Where it's kind of a shutting down
inside.
Inside. It's shutting down inside, and obviously from the outside, from the other person, they experience it as I can't get through to this person. I can't communicate.
For sure.
The person has put up a brick wall. They can still be in the room, and
that's right.
They could be spoken to, but they're not tending to
physically present, but emotionally not there.
Yeah, they're no longer listening or being able to hear it, and not sort of coming back with anything.
What's happened in this situation is that there's been a flooding of hormones into the body, cortisol and adrenaline. Now, from research, we found this takes about 20 minutes to leach through and go out of the system, so the person isn't subject to, you're talking to chemicals when you're trying to communicate with somebody who's aroused like that. And this leads us to the remedy for stonewalling. The remedy is, as I did with my wife there, allow time for the other person to calm down. And the other person goes off and goes, right, okay, I'm not going to dwell on that and keep thinking about it because that's not calming down. You're rehearsing it. She goes and watches TV. Or she goes into a hot bath, or goes to walk the dog, or goes and plays with the cat, or goes and takes the kid out, or some other activity that the person can engage in and put the dispute, the disagreement, the anger, resentment, whatever it may be, to one side, and then come back to when they're calmer.
Mm-hmm.
And that leads us to another Gottman manoeuvre that they've investigated, which is repair attempts.
Let me just go back just before going to repair attempts. It must be extremely tricky working with clients as well, if I put myself in that picture and kind of look at how it works for me.
Mm-hmm.
The flooding, the emotional flooding where, adrenal glands, fire, your heart rate goes up and the like, that tends to sit with me for quite a long time in comparison to my wife. So my wife can kind of, soothe fairly quickly and repair and kind of say, oh, look, sorry about that or whatever it might be. And for me, that 20 minutes, I think for me is more like 2 hours or I can kind of hold, this upset for extended periods of time, much greater. I imagine in that sort of space, my work would be to kind of self-soothe, try and do that because it kind of naturally happens faster and easier for my wife. So it's interesting just to see that dynamic and how that might play in. But you were saying about the repair attempts?
Repair attempts are coming back after the event and saying, look, I'm sorry about that. Can we talk about that? Or what can I do to sort that? Or how can I do this differently in future? We don't want to be continuing to come to blows over this or have these arguments. And some people come more naturally to repair attempts. Some people have, because of their past history of behaviour and learning, and particularly often their family modelling, the notion of what's gone is gone. We'll put it behind us and just let it go. Other people are going, no, it's still there and we've got to work it out. I'm not finished with it. If you get that difference between partners, you have to negotiate, which path are we going to follow here on this issue? Maybe it's an issue that, okay, if it's okay to let it go, it's a smaller issue, perhaps it doesn't have too much emotional residual distress, it can maybe let go. Past is past, gone is gone. On other occasions, it's going to be really important to address it. So it's on a case-by-case basis. We've got to look at that in terms of coming up to fix things up. Now, the fixing of things up might be you come home with a bunch of flowers. This is a little gift from the Languages of Love notion.
Olive branch.
So, I'm sorry. Yeah. You might not even say I'm sorry. Some guys will have difficulty sort of doing that because of the culture. They just give the flowers and the wife goes, oh, righto, thank you. Or if it's carrying on, the wife still wants to put the flowers on, so no, I'm not going to forgive you. So then the guy will have to start, well, okay, what can I do to sort of sort things out and make things right? And coming to discuss.
It's kind of like there's a repair attempt. Example is bringing flowers. There can also be a rejection of the repair attempt of saying, I think it's the masters that have this sort of fluency between when one goes out and tries to repair, the other one more often than not is quite accommodating to that and receptive to it and accepts that, and it kind of happens a bit more seamlessly.
Yeah. Well, that's another difference between the masters and the disasters. I only mentioned one before. The masters will make repair attempts. They'll make them more often, they'll make them more quickly than the disasters. The disasters tend to let it go or to fester and not be resolved.
And is it right to say, sorry to jump in, is it right to say that the repair attempts are not only just in terms of saying the words I'm sorry or giving a gift, that sometimes it can be, being playful or offering kind of a more lighthearted a comment or gesture to kind of break this, because it might be going to a serious sort of, there might be a more serious manoeuvre going on in the conversation and someone just lightheartedly cracks a joke or something, and that's accepted.
Sure.
So it can be quite subtle in the masters.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Fascinating stuff.
It is,
stuff. Maybe we can move across a little bit about, talk a little bit about the sound relationship house.
Sure.
If you like. I mean, obviously we've discussed this previously and at other times, but maybe for our listeners, you can talk a little bit about the general framework of the sound relationship house, and we'll kind of look at each one of those.
Yeah. Okay. So John and Julie Gottman drew up a little picture of a house, and they equated a relationship to a house. And they start with saying, okay, there needs to be, obviously when you're building a house, the first thing you do is you put down a foundation. Now, I've done a little bit of thinking on this. In actual fact, I think I stepped back a little bit on this, and I'm looking to what John and Julie Gottman are now doing. They're developing courses for what you could call pre-relationship, I suppose, getting ready for a serious relationship. Because I'm thinking when you build a house, the first thing you do is you locate the right site. So this would perhaps equate with going out and making yourself clear in your mind about what sort of person you'd want as a partner and what sort of person you need to be the right partner for that person. So this is sort of finding the site, the location to put down the house. And then there's a clearing of the site. So the clearing of the site would be that you adjust your life so that, you know, you can enter this relationship. You might drop all the other friends that you're casually dating, or you might not get so involved in 7 nights a week of your sport or something. So, but going back to John and Julie's model, the sound relationship house is based on the firm foundation of what we call the love maps. And this is knowing the partner's world. Now, the notion of the map is an interesting one if we look at it in these terms. These days we've got so many digital maps. Young folk probably aren't familiar with paper maps or Gregory Street directories. Remember those? I often say that to a client. Well, if I picked up a Gregory Street directory of Canberra in 2000, I wouldn't find a lot of the suburbs that exist today on it. So this leads us to thinking, okay, a map can change. And our partner can change. So what we need to do is not only know the partner well at a particular point in time, but as they progress through life, keep updating the Gregory Street directory of the partner, if you like.
Geez, that's a nice analogy. Because the Gregory's, the paper map was always updated. Each year it would come out with other streets.
I'm wondering how long
suburbs.
I can use it, with my clients before the kids start going, what's a Gregory Street directory?
Yeah.
I don't know how. I think they've stopped producing.
And if I think about it, who I am 3 years ago is very different to who I am today. And certainly over the life of my marriage and relationship, we've both changed quite immensely. And, we're parents now.
Yeah.
That's very, very different.
Oh, yeah.
It's a really nice analogy.
You probably have been doing automatic upgrades, if I can use that computer term, Nesh. Some people don't do that, and they've got a fixed image of their partner in the past, and the partner's perhaps protesting against that or feeling invalidated when their current person comes to the fore. You're thinking about maybe 5 years ago, I've changed since then. So it's important to upgrade those love maps. But first and foremost, it's important to really use the love maps and mesh in your understanding of the other person's hopes and dreams and wishes and successes and failures and all those aspects that make up a person, as intimately and in as much depth as you can. That certainly aids then to develop some sort of fondness and affection for the person, which is the next layer of the sound relationship house. So we think of the love maps being like the concrete foundation or wooden house, wooden floor on top of the piles. And if you've got foundations, most of them are poured these days, being perhaps the carpet, the underlay and the carpet, next layer going up. And then you get a fairly important little aspect of relationships. There's 7 of them in all that John and Julie Gottman came up with, which is the turning towards turning away. This is a difference between the masters and the disasters as well. The masters did a lot more than the disasters. Here's an example of turning towards. I'm sitting there at night on my computer or with my book, which tends to be how I am. Maybe I'm watching a bit of TV, rarely that, in the lounge. My wife is sitting on the lounge there and she's researching cat videos because she loves cat videos. She loves cats. And she go, oh, look at this little guy. And I will turn towards her and go, oh, yeah, any careless little fella down here. Then I'll go back to my book. This is a turn towards.
Mm.
A turn away would be, yeah. Turning against, which is even worse, would be, look, don't bother me with these damn cat videos. You know, I'm sick and tired of cat videos. Whoa, that's going to be a real relationship builder, I don't think.
Mm.
So this turning towards and turning away, here it was sharing an interest. In other cases, it might be, oh, I need to talk. Oh, they want to share an upset. So you turn towards them. Yeah, what's the matter? You know, what's going on? Tell me about this.
Mm.
So
it's
this
kind of like taking an interest.
Emotional availability,
Yeah.
and taking an interest, absolutely. It's like, I'm tuned in here. Almost like having a radar, blip, 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 blip. Oh, there's a problem. Oh, what is it? So this is the other bottom layer.
It kind of means that you're not hitting major, I suppose, major challenges as frequently because you're attending to them as you go, and there's some goodwill that's built there. There's that fondness and admiration that you touched on as well.
For sure. And I guess in a lot of relationships, if not every relationship, we won't always get this right. There'll be a time when someone comes home very stressed or something and they turn away. They don't really mean to.
Sure.
And that's when the repair team comes in. You come back later and go, look, sorry about that, hard day at work, or something's gone on. Johnny got sent home with a note from school. It's happened again. He bashed the bully or whatever.
Yeah.
So this thing goes on. Then the other thing that comes up next in the Sound Relationship House, we're starting to lay this foundation down. I guess I better turn to the uprights, the walls being put up. And as these first three are developing, this is the love and the connection, we start putting up the pillars or the walls of trust and commitment. And trust's an interesting one. Some people find it interesting in terms of, how do I trust? Do I let them go and see if they don't fulfill my expectations and disappoint me? Oh, they didn't. Good. I trust them. Or do we go, I'll just keep an eye on things here and we're not completely trusting? So this can often provide difficulties in a relationship where there's a lack of trust, a joint account. One of the partners is a bit a little more relaxed or lax about expenditure. So they go out and they buy themselves a new motorbike or a new cycle or a gun or a dress or an expensive pair of shoes without consulting the other partner. Then you're getting this difficulty of, I can't trust you with money, you see. So that could be trust there. People who go out a lot socially, say, for example, we'll pick on the poor female partner here. She's a very relaxed, very social lady, and she's talking to everybody around the room. Partner starts to think, what's going on here? Like, I'm over here and she's over there chatting to that bloke. There's a bit of jealousy arises. Mm-hmm. You see? So this is the trust pillar. The commitment pillar is probably a little bit self-evident. You're committing to the relationship, you're committing to the person, you're committing to a common future. This all, when you're working this way, starts to develop the positive perspective on things rather than a negative perspective. We're hopeful a relationship is the one that we're building. It's not a perfect relationship. No relationship is perfect. But we're working towards this and we can overcome our struggles. Even though this is sometimes major difficulties, we're working on this. We're together. We got each other's back. So this is the positive perspective. We can do this. So the negative perspective is going, I don't know if this relationship's going to work. I don't know if I've got the understanding or the support. He or she wouldn't understand. There's no point talking to them. They don't hear what I'm saying. They don't understand. They don't care. That's a negative perspective.
And the trust and the commitment are the two pillars. Do you think that the Gottmans sort of put them up as holding the roof up in particular, that trust and commitment are very specific? They hold a little bit more weight, so to speak, or if one of them gets damaged, it tends to kind of shake the house a bit more?
For sure, yeah. The Gottmans talk about when there's an infidelity or an affair, or sometimes they'll use the word in the literature, or perhaps some people might use it in counselling. I try not to use that word because it's a little bit pejorative. Betrayal. That this affects all levels of the sound relationship house. I use the metaphor in therapy that it's a little bit like an earthquake. You know, the house doesn't come completely tumbling down, perhaps. People coming in for therapy, usually the house hasn't come completely tumbling down, because if it had, the analogy would be they're off to the solicitors and the law court. So what do we do, folks? Well, we got to, first of all, actually, with an earthquake, you'd clear the site properly if it was a really bad one. Okay, so what would clearing the site mean? You go right back in therapy to the building the love maps, and you start rebuilding the sound relationship house. Maybe if it's not such a severe earthquake in their mind, in their experience, in their emotions, you can start repairing it. The important thing I stress is it's not going back to the relationship we had before. That's wrong thinking, in that the relationship we had before there was an infidelity, be it physical or be it cyber or be it emotional, wasn't working because there was this quest for getting affection, getting understanding, getting connection, building a love map with someone outside the relationship. So we have to go to a different, newer relationship, not going back, but going forward. John and Julie Gottman write sometimes about relationship #1, relationship #2. That's how I conceive of it and describe it to my clients.
There's a distinction between trying to go back to the relationship how it was, because the way that it was led to someone looking outside of the relationship and seeking connection with another person.
Absolutely.
And so rather than looking at it from, I wanted to go back to how it was, in actual fact,
how it wasn't so good.
Yeah, it wasn't so good, because a symptom of that was that someone looked outside.
There's one of these
building
elements
some
missing.
new relationship, that has those fundamentals entwined in it, where people are feeling that connection, fulfillment.
For sure.
The love maps are strong and the like, is more of the target rather than trying to go back.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
That's a huge distinction.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Well, see, I think masters of a relationship, or get buyers, if we could call that. We're not maybe masters, but we're doing the best we can, but we're not disasters.
I'm definitely not a master.
I'm thinking I'm a get buyer. Yeah. I think there's this other category John and Julie haven't yet worked out. The rest of us.
Lucky our wives are not in here to take the mic, because it would all change at that point.
Well, I can't recall if I said earlier, but I'll repeat it if I did. I said to my wife after the 4 horsemen had galloped through, I went in and said, oh, look, gee whiz, we've just had the 4 horsemen gallop through here, stampede through here, and I think I said a bit egotistical, eh? I'm a master relationship. My gorgeous wife turned to us and said, no, you're not. so I thought there's maybe a third category here, the guy who tries hard, the gal who tries hard. Well, I think this is a very important thing we're doing now. We're laughing.
Yeah.
I think to not take things too seriously is helpful.
Yeah, playfulness.
To accept human failure, to accept striving, to accept good enough rather than perfect, because there's no perfect.
Normalise that we can trip over that. I make a mess of a lot of things, and it's helpful if my wife can kind of see that, and likewise in the opposite end, that we're not perfect, and we're not going to, even in actual fact, I'm assuming that actually I know that the masters also trip, and they also say awful things to each other, and all sorts of things. It's how that whether it damages a relationship or whether it's merely a hiccup.
Yeah, they pick up.
Yeah.
They come back and do the repair attempt. They do the bits for connection. They start working back on it. Then another level, if we go on into the house, the Gottmans talk about then is how to manage conflict, because conflict's going to be inevitable. Inevitable. There can be no relationship without conflict. So what we're looking at there is stressing the fact that we're not solving conflict. Some conflicts can be solved. There are also in relationships unresolvable conflicts. Along those lines, John and Julie Gottman found that in every relationship, I'll stress that again by repetition, every relationship, around about 70% of problems are what they call perennial problems. There won't be a resolution. There won't be a solution. It's simply not possible. People aren't going to shift on something. So the loving partner has to go, okay, right, I can live with that. That's the price I'm prepared to pay. That's what the economists call a response cost. A response cost is if I'm going down to the car yard, an example here, I want the red hole on the blue Ford, red hole on blue Ford, I'll take the blue Ford. My response in taking the blue Ford is I don't get a red hole.
Yeah.
But that's okay because I got this one.
And there's an understanding that those positions will never meet.
That's exactly it.
We can actually hold two different perspectives or two different viewpoints at the same time. That it could be as simple as colours, where my favourite colour is red, and my partner says blue, and we'll never convince each other. In actual fact, we don't need to. That we can kind of live with one another and live in an enriching and vibrant marriage.
Yeah.
With different preferences of colour.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah. Some differences are going to be really significant. I mean, some religious differences, some political differences. If they're not there in the beginning of a relationship, sometimes they might emerge later. The person looks at the love map and finds they're supporting a different political viewpoint of the partner, and that becomes a real
kind of like what
problem.
You touched on before in terms of how to discipline kids, for example, is a fairly common one.
Very.
And maybe this isn't quite fair, but men and women might have different viewpoints. In actual fact, I think partner and partner have different viewpoints because we come from different homes.
Yeah.
And so trying to appreciate the homes we've come from, I imagine that having vastly different experiences as children, and growing up into adults as well, will change how we do those things. So trying to, I suppose, appreciate that in each other and put that into context as to why one person feels that maybe being more stern with the children is useful, while the other might say, let's be a little bit more gentler or understanding or do more gentle, patience, quietness.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I can think of an example there in terms of my gorgeous stepdaughter. She was parented a very different way to the way my children were parented. And that was because we didn't want to be putting her in a position where she was spending half time with her dad, half time with us, that she felt we had more rules than he had. And she was going to, when she got old enough, make a choice to go and live with him instead of with the mum.
Sure.
So I had to come to a compromise there, and I remember my kids saying to me, they were semi-adult or late teens at the time, how come she can do this? We were never allowed to do that. Different time, different child, different context. I have to be flexible in this. Yeah, my parenting beliefs are, you've seen them, you've lived them. You reckon I was a good dad. I hope they still think I'm a good dad. I think they do. I did the best I could. Then with the little one, the gorgeous stepdaughter, I took a different line. She hasn't turned out, too bad. In fact, she's turned out spectacular. But the flexibility was really important there.
I imagine that wouldn't have been easy.
No, it was pretty difficult. Yeah.
Just on a personal level, in terms of doing it differently.
Well,
it
the balance
starts to tug us in different directions.
And I'm feeling like I'm sort of a bit of a sellout to my kids.
Yeah.
How come you're letting this kid go so easy? How come we had it so more difficult? I was going to say hard, but they didn't really have it hard, and I don't think they'd say that. Stricter, more traditional. Wasn't cruel or anything like that, but I mean, strict boundaries. Whereas the little one was like, example, bedtime. She went to bed whenever she wanted.
Yeah.
My kids in bed by whatever the hour was. I can't remember now. That was it. Boom. Go to bed. Stay in bed. The little one would be put to bed, come out again, or not go to bed. But as I say, I love it a bit, and it worked out really well. So there's compromise there. And that's an important aspect in the Sound Relationship House interactions, compromise. We do an exercise where we have compromise. We draw two circles. When the inner circle is things can't be compromised, the outer circle is things that the person is prepared to compromise. Then we discuss in therapy. I did one this morning. Worked out really well, I hope. The people seemed very happy and they said it really was helpful. So these are the sort of things we can be doing, helping people come to compromise when there are differences of opinion. And the funny part about it was, I think, obviously no names, no pact rule, nothing like that. The people aren't being identified. And if they're listening to this, it's not you. Okay. They came down to going, hey, actually, we're thinking the same thing.
Yeah.
But they were saying it differently.
That's so common.
And
but there's an underlying value there. There's an underlying intent. Just two ways to come at the same thing.
Well, you mentioned the word there, value, which is really important in my view. I think I personally stress that probably more than the Gottmans do. The next top two layers of the sound relationship house are making life dreams come true and creating shared meaning. This is about the congruence of values. Now, not all people's values are going to be equivalent in a relationship. I'm not quite sure what the critical mass is, but I think for a relationship to work, you have to have a fair amount of congruence, that is equivalence, in your values between the two partners. And I had a story of a couple. They were both in a second relationship, and the second relationship couple went to visit her former partner they'd become friends with, which was interesting. It was apparently quite a good sort of relationship they had. They had a dinner together, and on the way home, the husband said to the wife, "It's really interesting. I watched you interacting with Bob or George or Tom or whatever we want to call him, and you disagreed, respectfully and politely, but you disagreed on every single issue you discussed. How is it you possibly spent X number of years with this man?" You know? And the wife said, "Yeah, I know. It's incredible, isn't it?" They both sort of realised at that stage that, wow, values are really something that's terribly important. You know, the difference in values had broken up both their first relationships.
Yeah.
They hadn't realised that at the time. In their maturity and with this experience, they reflected back and they, wow, yeah, it's about values. Interesting.
Fascinating stuff, Greg. Really fascinating to put a model around how we experience our relationships, our marriages, our capacity to go out and identify, you know, whether it be commitment or going out and having trust, fondness, love maps, you know, shared meaning, to put some language and some direction and ideas around how we can do it better. Where are we tripping over? The four horsemen. I think some really powerful stuff. Any literature that you would, before we finish up, any literature that you might offer in terms of a good starting point if anyone's interested in finding out a little bit more about whether it be, you know, relationships or the Gottman approach?
Yeah. And if John Gottman is listening to this, I think a commission might be in order because I recommended every couple. Just joking, John. I always recommend that they go out and get themselves a copy of the little paperback, about $21, you know, standard paperback size. 7 principles for making relationships work, or making marriages work. Actually, you should be making relationships work in the modern era. Relationships, marriages, you know, so becoming less common these days. 7 principles for making marriages work by John Gottman and Nan Silver, Silver.
Excellent.
This goes through and gives, as you said, Nesh, there the vocabulary. We use the term lexicon, which is like a list of all the words we use and the terms we use, of being able to discuss these issues. And having a language to do that sometimes is really important because sometimes a process isn't labelled or named by a couple and they're wandering around, and if they could give it a name, makes it easy to go, hey, let's focus on X, Y, Z. Let's talk about X, Y, Z.
I think it goes without saying it's probably, you know, at least in an idealistic world, good if both partners were to read it at the same time.
I recommend it, yeah, definitely. And maybe even discuss, you know, hey, I'm thinking this. What do you reckon there? Oh, that's garbage. Or, yeah, that's good. All that's good.
Lovely, lovely. Really appreciate you coming to speak today on a Better Thinking podcast. It's been great to hear all about it, and I think really eloquently, you know, said by you to you know, some of the things that we should really go out and explore with I imagine in our own relationships. So thanks very much, Greg.
Pleasure, Nesh. Thanks.